Good afternoon and welcome to the new weight loss drugs. More than $200 billion worth of disruption for healthcare, fitness, social lives, and more. And that's just in the US. This is part of a series of occasional forums on unanticipated disruptions caused by technological change. This program is on the record and is being recorded. Our next public program will be next Monday morning at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, the start of 4 days of USC forums and roundtables from breakfast through lunch each day, leading off with deep fakes on election cybersecurity in the age of AI. These will be in person only, and due to security, RSVPs will be required. We'll be at the Chicago building, so I think you understand the security issue. Now to today's forum and our guest, Jeff Cole, director of the USC Center on the Digital Future. You all have his bio here in the room, and we'll put a link to his bio in the chat. So welcome to Jeff. You've been following and writing about this for a while, but now this subject seems to be taking off.
Thank you, Adam. Taking off is a good way of describing it. It's really nice to be here at USC's beautiful new offices, headquarters in Washington, D.C. Those who know me know the work I've done over the last 25 years on the internet. I'm really, more than being interested in technology, I'm interested in disruption. Change that usually comes from unexpected places, more often than not, two guys in a garage. Change that turns business models upside down, has unexpected winners and losers, sometimes massive winners, and changes everything. 25 years ago, I was convinced, although you didn't have to be a genius to be convinced, that the internet was fundamentally going to transform almost everything in our lives. Little did we know. We were a little more optimistic that the positive changes would outweigh the negative. I think that's still the case, but the negative have been pretty serious as well. So my colleagues, I think, have been a little perplexed as to why all of a sudden I'm looking at this new class of weight loss drugs, which I'm going to use generically as Ozempic. There are other brands, Mounjaro, Zepbound, but I think Ozempic is the best known, so I'm going to use Ozempic generically for all of them. But why I'm interested? But this makes complete sense and is a perfect transition because these drugs are remarkably disruptive. Trillions of dollars are in the balance. It may make or break our healthcare system, may prolong life, change people's quality of life, and the effects we're just beginning. Every day in the press is talk of a new ailment or syndrome that may be affected by these medications. So let's start. Let's start by having some fun. In 1966, Disneyland introduced a new ride that was about to become one of the most popular attractions of all time. It's a Small World, ironically named, considering the context I'm using it in. And It's a Small World, which I don't have to ask if you've been on it. You'd ride a boat through a building and you would see dolls from all over the world dancing in tune to a song that once you heard, it took weeks to get out of your brain. It was a remarkably successful ride. The problem, it opened in 1966. In 2007, they had to shut it down for renovations. The problem was that it was built in 1966 for 20 people to ride on these boats. By 2007, those 20 people weighed what they weighed in 1966, plus another 500 pounds. The boats started hitting the bottom, started getting stuck. People had to come and rescue, not rescue as if they were in danger, but to move the boats because the channels were just deep enough to let the boat float, and the boats couldn't float anymore. And they had to shut it down. They did other renovations as well and dig the channel deeper so that 20 people at 2007 weights could comfortably go through the ride. In America today, 2/3 of us are overweight. About half of those are obese. Worldwide, it's estimated that about 1 billion people are obese. And of course, this heavily leans towards developed countries. When I go to Britain, when I go to Australia, to Scandinavia, all of a sudden you can see people are getting bigger. We in America have set a very high bar, but the rest of the world seems determined to meet us or match us. China now is having a crisis of obesity, which is middle class and good life and easy availability of food coming to them. We spend about $200 billion a year in America on health-related issues surrounding obesity. That number is climbing rapidly as the population ages, and other costs may even be higher. MIT estimates that the cost of obesity to employers, this number seems high to me, is $425 billion a year. 146 billion of that in higher medical costs, 82 billion on missed work, 160 billion on reduced productivity, although that's hard to measure, 31 billion on disability, and 5 billion on workers' comp. This is a worldwide crisis. And we know that until these medications, the way people lost weight was through diets. Diets which traditionally meant eating less and better and exercising. Although there's some very good evidence lately that exercising, of course, is good for cardiovascular and keeping the body in shape, but actually does not play a very significant role in losing weight. And we know the problem with these diets, whether they are organized diets through Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers or Nutrisystem, or they are, I'm going to use crazy diets that you only eat protein, you only eat carbs, you only eat when the moon is full, or diets you just do yourself. We know that 95% of those diets fail. And in most cases, people gain more weight than they had lost. And as we were growing up, I used to hear people say, if only there were a pill I could take every day and lose weight. Well, these medications are actually better than that because they're once a week. So there's a temptation to say that these semaglutides and these medications, as I said, Ozempic, the best known, that's Novo Nordisk, Mounjaro, which is Lilly, and Zepbound, and there are versions. This was a medication originally intended for diabetics, and they noticed that as it was reducing blood sugar, it was causing people to lose weight. We'll talk in a few minutes about all the other diseases this may be prescribed for in the very short term. But we know that these medications, it's too early to call them miracle drugs, but they're showing some really promising signs. First thing is, if you take them, whether you take the diabetic version or you take the pure weight loss version, and the major difference is just the dosage. It seems that, the evidence is pretty clear. Most people, some people seem to be resistant to them, not a very high percentage, estimated at about 5 to 8%. No negative effect, but they just don't work. But for almost everybody else, weight loss is 15 to 20% of body weight, usually within a year. That's the positive. If you want to look at the negatives, and let's look at the negatives because it's very important to understand. The negatives are side effects. The side effects to this point are some nausea, usually short-term, constipation or diarrhea, hopefully not at the same time. And those side effects seem to go away. There are some other, I wouldn't call them side effects, but there are some other things that people should be aware of. To successfully continue to lose weight, for most people, they have to take these medications for the rest of their lives. It becomes like a statin or like a blood pressure medication. There's no danger, at least identifiable to this point, about taking them the rest of our lives. There are economic consequences, which we'll get to shortly. And it's not much different than a diet. In a diet, we know how to lose weight, but most of us don't learn how to permanently change our behaviors so that when we go off of the diet, we can maintain the weight loss. The same is true of these medications. They are simply causing weight to drop, but we're not learning better eating habits necessarily. And those effects, unless you really are one of those 5% who can just learn how to change, the weight will come back from these drugs as well. Other effects beyond we have to take them the rest of our lives, the demand for these drugs, the best evidence is in America, about 8% are using some variation. The demand is so extraordinary that there are shortages and people are going and looking and finding counterfeit drugs. Charlatans on the web are selling what are counterfeit. They're seeing there may be health risks. This has nothing to do with the medications themselves, but people going to counterfeits. The FDA has given emergency approval because of the demand and shortages for what are called compounded versions. And the compounded versions, in all likelihood, are as safe as the pure, but we don't know that. And we also see another problem is there's so much demand that in some countries, India has shown this already, that production has shifted from insulin and other life-saving drugs into this, that there are the shortages for drugs some people need to live on. That the drug manufacturers say is temporary. We will see what happens. That's the negative. Some side effects. So far, there have not been any identifiable long-term negative effects beyond the short-term side effects. The positives are not only does it cause weight loss, which is what most people are using them for. They also happen to be the diabetic versions. Ozempic and Mounjaro seem to be very effective for blood sugar control. But they also seem to play, and it's recognized, an important role in dealing with heart disease and preventing strokes. They're playing a role in the reduction of kidney disease and fatty liver, which is one of the fastest growing diseases of the last 10 years. They seem to be playing a role in sleep apnea, an important role. Now, some of this, we may be giving it credit more than it deserves. Some of this, such as dealing with sleep apnea, may just be because people are losing weight. The loss of weight deals with the sleep apnea. Nonetheless, it does seem to be an effective way to deal with sleep apnea. There's very recent evidence in the last 2 weeks that it may play an important role in dealing with certain cancers, particularly cancers related to obesity. There's some early evidence that it may play some role in Alzheimer's, although other research seems to be moving even faster. And Adam shared with me yesterday, and this is just getting ridiculous, that it may also improve people's sex lives. Does it need to do more than that? I mean, it's beginning to sound like a miracle drug. These are not new drugs. They've been around in one form or another close to 10 years, but we still need to know, as potentially in America, we may have a user base of over 200 million users ultimately, once the cost is affordable. we have to really follow the long-term effects, if any. But there are even some doctors, as a very well-known doctor just in the last week, who said he wishes every one of his patients over 65 was taking these. Not all of his patients over 65 can afford them. But this potentially may become a prophylactic medication if proven to be as safe as it seems to be at the moment, that people take before some of these diseases, not only to keep them thin, but as a preventative for heart attack, stroke, and maybe, and I don't want to accept yet that cancer or Alzheimer's, but maybe potentially even that. So it does sound like it is on the road to being a miracle, and there are miracle drugs, not a lot. Penicillin is a miracle drug. Antibiotics, even though they're getting less effective at the moment, those are the medications that lifted lifespan from the late 40s or early 50s up into the late 70s and 80s today, average lifespan. Although I do some work with AARP, and they will tell you the fastest growing age group in America is 85 plus. The second fastest growing age group in America is 100 plus. We were just talking before that as I was growing up, it was very rare to see somebody turn 100, and you'd see them on the news. Now they're all over the place. Even people in the public eye, like Henry Kissinger, who passed away at 100, or Norman Lear, who passed away at close to 102. These may be medications that lift the average lifespan from the late 70s or early 80s into the 90s. More than that, more than just keeping people alive, the potential is to also greatly improve the quality of life. These are all positives. Now, what's the sobering part of this? I mentioned the side effects are minor generally, although there are some people who get so nauseous they do go off the drug with no effects once they go off the drug. These drugs are expensive. These drugs are $900 to $1,300 a month, unless covered by insurance. And insurance does not, with a few exceptions, insurance does not cover weight loss medications such as Ozempic unless you are diabetic, morbidly obese, or have some condition that is greatly endangered by being obese. So the truth is, very few people can get these drugs paid for.
Still expensive, even if insurance covers part of it.
We'll come to that in a second. But right now, 900 to 13 without insurance. Although there's a very interesting story that came out last week, but I should back up for a second and say that's one of the reasons the attention on these medications seems to be dominated by Hollywood celebrities and the very rich who are getting all this attention. But according to, I forget which newspaper, but because I read about 5 of them, they're all pretty good. Turns out the capital of these medications, the place where the percentage is the highest, is Bowling Green, Kentucky. And the reason for that, not Hollywood, not Midtown Manhattan, not Georgetown in Washington, D.C., and the reason for that is Kentucky's health insurance covers it.
Oh, okay.
But these are right now, very few people get access through insurance, which is why people who want it and have heard of seeing others lose weight are turning to counterfeits, turning to other methods as well. But the $900 to $1,300 has been an absolute bonanza for the pharmaceutical companies. The one that has benefited the most till now is Novo Nordisk. Novo is now the biggest company in Europe. They're based in Denmark. They are bigger than the Danish economy. Sadly, scientists say that what Novo Nordisk is selling for $900 to $1,300 a month can be manufactured profitably for $5 a month.
Wow. Whoa.
Furthermore, Americans, as we are used to, are getting screwed. These same medications are available in the UK for $200 a month and in Canada for $150 a month. The good news is this is going to change. It can't happen fast enough. It's going to change through the expiration of patents. It's going to change through competition. Roche has announced that they're coming out with one. Almost already it's Eli Lilly and Novo. It's Roche, almost every medical pharmaceutical company. And now there's these compounded versions, which if they turn out to be safe, there's no reason they shouldn't, but we don't know that yet. They're starting to be advertised for $199 a month. But ultimately, these drugs, in my view, will come down to the $30 to $50 a month. Is that 2 years? Is that 6 years? We don't know. But that's fundamental to their being able to, quote, be a miracle drug if safe, if they are able to come down to that level. So let's look at the economic consequences. Without these medications, our healthcare system and Medicare will go bankrupt. Already today, as I mentioned earlier, it's $200 billion a year on health-related treatment for obesity-related diseases. And that number is growing. If we are able to shift that cost onto insurance companies, we can cut healthcare costs in America down by potentially 95%. But the system still doesn't work if that $200 billion is absorbed by the healthcare companies, because the cost of healthcare is going to skyrocket. The dream scenario here, and we're heading towards it, but it may not be as fast as we'd like. The dream scenario all depends on these being $20, $30 a month. If they are, and if they remain as safe as they appear to be at the moment, long term, the dream scenario is healthcare costs are reduced immensely. 80–90% of the $200 billion and climbing. And health insurance costs drop significantly because health insurance companies are paying a large percentage of that $200 billion. The loser in that dream scenario is Novo Nordisk, who isn't getting $900 to $1,300 for a $5 medication. I don't think any of us will shed tears, but these are the economics of where these drugs need to go. Now, economically, I'll come back in a minute. In addition, already talking about how healthcare potentially can be a big winner, health insurance can be a big winner. We're also seeing social disruption. Right now, America's favorite new game show is watching television and guessing who's on Ozempic. About 2 months ago, Barbara Streisand was on the internet and saw a picture of Melissa McCarthy looking very thin, and sent her a text. I think Streisand thought it was private. It wasn't. Asking, Melissa, are you on Ozempic? The whole internet crashed down on her. How dare you? How rude? How invasive, as if it's like outing somebody. And yeah, I find that puzzling, because if we have a friend we haven't seen in 4 months, and we meet them and all of a sudden they look really thin, what's the first question we ask them? How did you do it?
No, it's, are you sick?
Well,
Right, yeah, right.
are you sick can be one of the ways you did it, but hopefully not. But how did you do it? And what's interesting about that is, and this has really been interesting to me, we treat people who are using these medications as if they're cheating. This isn't fair. This isn't right. Now, I've noticed, I've done this talk. I'm newly getting into this and get increasingly fascinated and think it's getting more and more important. I've done this talk about 10 times. And I find that each time I do it, somebody comes up to me and says, I don't like it. These are wrong. These just shouldn't be allowed. There's just something wrong. They can't quite put their finger, but I just plain don't like it. And I'm really interested in this. And I try to probe a little bit and I say, well, we know this may save lives. We know obesity is dangerous. You don't see very many fat people of 90 years of age or older. And we know that diets don't work. Even though you want people to do it the old-fashioned hard way, eat less, exercise, we know that that's a 95% failure rate. So this, which not only prolongs your life, but greatly improves the quality of your life in those years. But it's a visceral reaction. I'm trying to really get a better handle on it because some of it may be a reaction that it looks like celebrities who need to lose 8 pounds are on it. And also, initially, maybe because people think it's cheating, people have been very reluctantly to admit that they're taking these drugs. They are outed. The best example of that is Oprah. Oprah, who we've watched as a fan over 30 some years, we've seen yo-yo up and down, knowing that diets for her and just don't work. And Oprah, who I'm a big fan of Oprah, who can even have private chefs, which I've always thought would make it a lot easier. Clearly it doesn't. And Oprah hasn't been able to maintain that loss. And she did become an investor and a board member of Weight Watchers. And then all of a sudden, within the last year, she has gotten thinner, I think, than we've ever seen her, and seems to be keeping it off, partially because she's an investor in Weight Watchers, and I think there's some legal issues there. And also, she reluctantly admitted, but Oprah's whole thing is honesty and leveling, and she admitted she was on these medications, and she resigned from Weight Watchers and even gave the money she made to philanthropy. But some people, Kelly Clarkson has lost a lot of weight and was sort of outed to where she didn't say which medication she was on, but she said one of them. And now, sadly, to your questions, to point, Steve, when people are sick and lost weight, people are going to think they're just on these medications. We're starting to field a lot of research on this. We're fielding it among the public in general, how they feel. Is it cheating? Is it wrong? Would they consider? But we're also talking to people who are on it and asking them, if you lose weight, would you volunteer that I did it through this? Would you say I did, but only if asked? Would you deny if asked? And we're really interested to see what the etiquette, what the openness, how comfortable people are. We're also asking people what kind, if they were able to lose the weight that it promises, what kind of side effects or what kind of effects would they tolerate, starting with minor side effects that go away, which is what we see now, to side effects that don't go away, to serious effects, all the way up to taking 10 years off your life. although really it should do the opposite. And we'll be really interested to see how strong the desire, of course, willing to lose 10 years off your life. You get a very different answer from someone in their 20s who doesn't think they want to live past 50 anyway. And then change, and then have a very different view when they get into their 40s. But nonetheless, we're really interested. But there is a lot of social stuff going on. And I would also add, of the people who just plain don't like it, if you had told me I was going to find that, my guess would have been, well, I bet these are thin people who just don't want everybody else to be thin. But so far, it's only about 8 people, so it's anecdotal. So far, it's been people who are slightly chubby, who just don't like this in some way or not.
Could it be because, in fact, people don't trust the notion that there's no price, that is, side effects that are more serious, and that the drugs aren't well enough known? Is that a
It could be any, and we're digging in on this is a phenomenon I didn't expect. Just and we're going to dig in on whether it is uncertainty about long-term effects. Maybe all the craziness over vaccines have made us nervous. Whether it is the cost. I also think it will change. Bowling Green, Kentucky aside, when it reaches the mass, no pun intended, of America, when it reaches working classes, not just Melissa McCarthy and Kelly Clarkson, and we see it not as a frivolous rich person's, but we really do want to get a handle on what that is.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Please.
Just a fact question.
Please ask questions, because if you don't ask questions, I don't learn a thing.
Well, that's not true about you, actually, but is the effect of the taking of the medicine simply that the dietary intake is reduced in most people who take it? Or does it, in fact, change what people want to eat? Or is that still an open research question? Because it seems to me, if you pay attention to, for example, something, as you know, I'm interested in, which is exercise, changing people by making them better able to exercise, for example, doesn't make them exercise because they don't want to exercise. And if I eat a lot of hamburgers and other stuff that's bad for me, and that's my diet, I'm not really ready to give it up just to lose some weight.
A wonderful question. Well, first of all, I'm not a physician, which is obvious. But
we have at least one at the table who is. So we'll get to that.
And I'm happy to be fact checked. But we do know the basic way these drugs work is by causing food to stay in the stomach longer and the stomach to empty more slowly, therefore diminishing the sense of hunger or appetite. Many people report, and this to me is really interesting, that the constant voices in their head about food go away on these medications. Not all, but many say the inner voice driving, but it does diminish the appetite. But it also seems to be changing what people crave. The area, and I'll hold on to that for a second, the area I want to move into, and then we'll open it to all questions, is I got interested in the internet because I believed it was going to change everything. The music industry, how cars are sold, I could go on for the next hour. What I wanted to learn when I became convinced this is a massive disruption is which businesses and activities are transformed. So let's start with the point you raised, Steve. At New York Sugar Week this year, and yes, that is a thing. New York Sugar Week is a meeting in the spring of sugar producers from around the world. It's not intended for the public. At New York, I don't think they keep them out. I don't think the public's generally interested. At New York Sugar Week this year, Walmart gave one of the keynotes and reported that they're starting to see declines. in some food sales, particularly for sweets and instant gratification foods. And they think, and this is coming, they believe, from these medications, that it's just many of the people on them report that not only do they eat less, they have no interest in sweets. I think it's the most addictive of the foods we eat. No interest in desserts. And Walmart's starting to see a little bit of evidence. The biggest food company in the world, Nestle, has now believes these are long-term and having an impact. They have created a new line of food called Vital Pursuit. Interesting name, which is for people who are on these medications. Less sugar, more protein. Other food companies, ConAgra and others, say they have them in the works. Restaurants are nervous because in restaurants, the biggest high profile, biggest profit margin sales are alcohol. And as I mentioned, this does diminish, maybe I didn't mention, and then all the other effects, this seems to play a role in stopping people from drinking, from alcoholism, gambling addiction, I think I did mention, shopping addiction, and tobacco, giving up smoking, because it deals with impulse control.
That's why nobody wants the medication.
Well, but if all of a sudden people are drinking less who are on this,
Yeah, that's it.
at a restaurant, alcohol and desserts are some of the biggest profit margin items. And I'll get to that in a second. And restaurants are on razor thin margins anyway. If you look at food, easy impulse food, if you go to sporting events or to concerts, they're expensive and almost everybody buys that, but they're incidental. Those events are so profitable. Food sales are a nice on top of, but not a make or break. Movie theaters, they are.
Yes.
Movie theaters, this varies. We do a lot of work on the return of the movie theater. But for an average Hollywood movie, in the first week in the theater, 90% of the ticket price goes to the studio. 10% goes to the theater. They survive on refreshment sales. And I did the keynote last year at CinemaCon, the big movie theater conference. And in addition to seeing all the new films, there are exhibit halls. One exhibit hall has all the new seats that recline and all the great. The other exhibit hall, the size of a football field, is all the concessions. You walk through, it's all free if you're at the conference. And all the different flavored popcorns, hot dogs, ice creams, all in that football-sized room. There was not one healthy concession. So this could break movie theaters, or we'll see. So we know. So I want to talk about some of the losers briefly, and then get to questions. So the losers, to some degree, may be the companies that sell food, but including restaurants and movie theaters and supermarket food. But we are seeing these new food lines that maybe will compensate. Other losers, but losers who could turn into winners. Of course, you'd think that Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and Nutrisystem are toast. And they should have been, but they got very smart. They figured out, wait a minute. First, we got to help our customers get these medications. So they find them if there are shortages. They work with them to find out if existing insurance and sometimes help them get it. And eventually they may help lots of people get it. And then they monitor you. They provide support groups. They become an important adjunct to being on these drugs. Will that compensate for all the food they used to sell? Probably not, but they do. There still is a niche for those weight loss companies. Other potential losers, the healthcare insurance, as I mentioned, unless these become affordable, become a significant loser. When or if and when they become affordable, they become a significant winner. Other effects, this is what we love about understanding disruption. Marriage may change. Relationships may change. As one partner in a relationship loses weight, there's a tendency, we've seen this with diets, that as they start being attractive to other people who pay them attention, they may not have gotten in years, there is a tendency for some of them to become reckless. I suggested to some of my friends at the studio, there's room for a rom-com or two where one partner suddenly gets thin, but that'll have a happy ending because then, of course, both partners can get thin, but relationships may change. So those are just some of the potential losers, the weight loss programs, the companies, health insurance, relationships, a couple of other winners, and then we really will end it. Fashion will be a winner. And not to stereotype people, but some people are sitting at home in their sweatpants, uncomfortable, unhappy to go out. Losing weight may more than likely will cause people to buy new clothes, more fashionable clothes, spend more money on clothes. And what do you do when all of a sudden you look good and you feel good and you have new clothes? You start traveling. And we expect travel to pick up and be a big winner. Therapy may become a big winner. Just as many unhappy people feel, if I play the lotto and can only get rich, all my problems will go away. And if you've looked at any of the case studies of people who win the lottery, it's tragic. I think it's like 15-1 horrible stories versus good stories. We may find people who think if only I can get thin and lose all this weight, life will be great. And they may discover not so, or not necessarily so. Plastic surgery or plastic surgeons are going to win in two ways. First, for the very obese, their skin stretches. And if they lose weight, it's still baggy and it's hanging, and they need surgery to try to tuck the skin in. That's for the very obese. But also, we're starting to see this as well. People who look good for the first time in many cases, look good to themselves. I mean, they always look good. But the people who feel good and look in the mirror and smile, they may start, and we think they already are starting to look at their noses, their chins, their faces, in some case for women, their breasts, and saying, let's go all the way. Let's really fix it all up now that we think plastic surgeons are going to do very well.
They already do.
And they do well. They're going to do even better. So right now, we're just identifying some of the businesses. As with the internet, we're going to see some very unexpected changes, which is why we're going to monitor this very, very closely and why it's so interesting. So just to finish, and hopefully we'll give people online a chance to ask questions as well. For these really to be potentially miracle medications, two things have to happen. I've touched on this already. One, there cannot be any long-term side effects or any long-term that are unacceptable, that really do endanger your lives. So far, the evidence is good, and these are not, even though they've been in our consciousness for 1 to 2 years, they have been around longer than that. They have to be long-term safe, and they have to be affordable. Otherwise, they will just change the lives of the rich and famous. It's over 200 million Americans and just as high a percentage of Swedes and Australians and Brits and others who need these medications. And if they are affordable and if they are safe, they may be miracles that not only may save people's lives, but greatly improve the quality of their life. But we do need more evidence. And with that, I welcome everybody who's online.
We see people all over the country actually who are online, and we have some people around the table who may also have.
So happy to take questions. You'll have to speak up or shout if you're online. So, okay. Gary, you had a question?
Yeah, another short-term winner is the media. It's got all these advertisements.
I'm sorry?
Another short-term winner is the media companies
Yes.
who have all these advertisements. But I wanted to extend that to your view on the disconnect between people who see these advertisements and either cannot get it, either because they can't afford it, or for whatever other reason, it's not available to them.
Well, two things worth mentioning. In the 1980s, as Steve Weisswasser, a legendary ABC, you really were a legend, Steve, stop it. ABC executive. In the 80s, the NAB had a code, and we're sitting in the old NAB building.
Wait a minute, I wrote my paper on
that there were you didn't advertise hard alcohol.
Still don't show people drinking in ads.
And you say, the NAB, there also were rules that you didn't advertise. Doctors and lawyers didn't advertise. Medications weren't advertised. Those rules gave way. And keep in mind, this was following tobacco advertising going from being the biggest advertiser on television to not being advertised on television. Medications are one of the biggest type of advertiser who filled that gap. And problems came from that. First of all, the ads are comical as they list 100 side effects at the speed of light that nobody could possibly process. But it also causes problems for physicians as they become brands and patients come in and say, I want this, even though this may not be the right medication for them. And right now, Ozempic and Wegovy, they're both the Novo, and we're starting to see Mounjaro. They are very big advertisers. The demand was there without the ads. The ads are increasing the demand, and that's causing the desperation that either I can't afford it because I don't qualify, or I can't get it. And that's what's causing people to move to counterfeits. But the other part of your question?
Well, it's the disconnect between what people see and what they can actually get, their opinions, how they vary as a result of that.
But you asked a second half.
That's really
all right.
Margot Apostolos in Los Angeles, if you could join us. We know that you do work in nutrition and related fields. So please, questions, comments?
Thank you. I don't know. I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm a professor of dance at USC for starting my 39th year, but my background comes from physical education. So I am a little troubled. I am very troubled. At the beginning, you really, exercise doesn't work. And I come from another point of saying, we've all got to move, and you can lose all the weight. But what about joint mobility? What about, even at whatever age, having some strength and agility if I fall off the chair, that I could pick myself up? So if we're just talking about losing weight, looking good, being fashionable, that's not all about it. I think we've got to think about the total picture. I'm saying, the drugs are there, and I'm going to come from a very personal note that my late brother was morbidly obese, and at one point had lost over 100 pounds and had the issue of excess skin, but due to the diabetes, couldn't have the surgeries. So when I buried him, I was shocked that he had put all the weight back on. He was more comfortable, literally, in his own skin. But never got to, with my passion of movement, I wrote numerous exercise plans for my brother just to go to the gym, try to do something, fly to New York, fly to New Jersey to be with him, to get him going. So I think there's got to be, I'm not going to discount the whole thing. But I'm saying you've got to have a fitness factor in there for all ages and all abilities.
First of all, I'm very sorry about your brother. I'm a big fan of the work you do in dance. What I said, and maybe I could have been, I hope I was clear, was the evidence, and it's pretty widespread, is that exercise does not contribute significantly to weight loss. By no means, exercise is essential. It is essential for keeping the body in shape. Yeah. There's great joy that comes from exercising, for balance, the benefits of exercise are legendary and undisputed. But the evidence seems to be that without these medications, the way you lose weight is by eating less, not as much by exercising. That does not negate the incredible benefit, and I'm not saying that because I'm speaking to you, the incredible benefits of exercise. And maybe you've identified another danger here, which is people who lose the weight. That's all I wanted. Right. Therefore, I'm not going to bother to exercise. And maybe we need to try to train them. But that's an excellent point, that many people may only be exercising because they think they will lose weight and will lose interest. But no one can dispute the incredible benefits of exercise.
Millions do. Steve. It seems to me that there are some really imponderable issues that need to play out over time before some of these consequences can be reliably assumed or predicted to exist. For example, people gain weight, use food for a variety of psychological reasons as well as physical reasons. They like the food, but also it is a source of comfort in the lives of millions of people. What happens to most people when the comfort goes away? I don't know that the answer is going to be they look in the mirror and say, well, I guess I'm really happy. And that's one concern I would suggest. The second, let
me do one.
I totally agree with what Margot said about exercise.
How could anybody dispute?
Well, I think you'd be amazed. I think people define their health by the size of their waist.
But no, we all identified that they may lose interest, but we're not saying that exercise is not essential and complete. Comfort food. Some of the people who are on this say that food is not as much fun as it used to be.
Well, then what's taking the place of the crutch?
Well, because we build our lives around food. It's how we celebrate every event. It's what Adam and Judy fed you before you sat down to this talk. We celebrate life through food. And food is, I do most of my business across a lunch table or a breakfast table. And we don't stop eating, but there is the possibility for some of that, I think everybody knows the quote I grew up with, in our family, we don't eat to live, we live to eat. I think everybody knows. And they take some of that away.
But at Harvard Business School, they say never eat lunch alone.
It's not, then you have nobody to throw a check to. There are necessary nutrients in food that people have to have.
Well, the lack of those nutrients is what Nestle is trying to do. We may see more foods that make up some of the nutrients. We may start under eating.
Well, that's right. Yeah. That's right. Where you get your calcium and where you get all the other things.
Well, right. Already we do much of that through supplements.
Yeah.
And then I would just suggest that there was a time 2 or 3 years ago, maybe a little longer, I lose track of it somewhat, in which the statins were described not quite as enthusiastically as this, and probably with less evidence, as the miracle drugs that were coming. And I don't actually follow it enough to know what happened with most of that. But there were claims for improvement for fighting Alzheimer's and all of the other serious illnesses, and statins were going to get us there.
And of course, in America, we know how many people have Alzheimer's, and we know, sort of. We know how many people die of heart attacks or strokes. We don't know how many lives of how many people are alive because of statins and blood pressure medication.
I'm merely suggesting that we don't know enough about if this just takes your weight away. This is one kind of product, and it will have a lot of those effects. If this actually does become a miracle cure for a whole range of diseases, some of which are related to weight and some of which are not, the consequence is even greater than you painted, seems to be.
I hope the attitude I've conveyed is, so far this is fascinating and potentially a game changer, potentially. And we want to be on top of it. We really want, and even, I don't own stock in these companies. I have a vested interest and I want America to, or the world to be healthier and better. But we will be ready if horrible things happen. But we really want to understand. But I'm not a physician. Where I bring skill and experience, as I tried to do with the internet, is how it changes the world, how it changes social structure, etiquette, business, and the case for should we be doing this. I don't know anyone now who says, "What are you doing?" You can't. I mean, there are things published almost every day.
Jeff just said he's not a physician, but we do have a physician here at the table. That is,
we'll have to talk offline unless you can figure. Sorry, it's nice to see you.
I need to say your knowledge of this is fantastic.
Coming from a physician,
you have covered every piece of this, and knowledge of the medical aspects of this is great. This has been a very important lecture that you've given. One issue on this that another maybe detrimental side effect of this, not a side effect, but a detrimental impact on society, is if we do have people live longer, we are going to have people in later years who are not earning, and Social Security costs will go up, long-term care costs will go up. And so that is also a potential.
That's such a powerful point. As we know, we're already experiencing this. In that Social Security was created by FDR in the 30s for people whose average lifespan may have been about 60.
Yes.
So we're already stretching. I said Medicare. I think I meant I think I said Medicare. I meant Social Security. Medicare came in the 60s from LBJ. So already people have not saved enough to live as long as we're living now. And this may exacerbate that. And that's a real problem. That's a problem that comes from people living longer, which is a good thing, mostly. As a baby boomer, I know in the workplace, people are sick of us. Get out of the way. Make room. You guys won't retire.
No, we're still going.
Yeah, those are it's good that we're experiencing this because it means people, but you raise a very powerful.
And you have to understand what's going to actually happen with birth rates, I suspect. We don't know that yet. Not necessarily related.
We have a pretty good evidence that the birth, in America, we would be shrinking fairly rapidly, but for immigration. And that's not, I'm not being political. That's the difference between us and Japan, for example, which is shrinking at an alarming rate. But already, I've added, as I talk about the negatives, I've added 2 more things from this conference. This is why I said, if we don't get questions, I don't learn. I now, with Margot's permission, I'm going to add the potential to not exercise because you're only exercising for weight loss, and the fact that the people aren't prepared to live.
Well, I actually have question too. I'm going to apologize for cutting in. What about this drug company Novo Nordisk being like having a bigger economy than Denmark? That's that in itself is astonishing, and I think it leads to important conversations about what's going to happen to big pharma and who's going to win that battle and how are they going to influence what we get in the future in terms of further development.
What's even more staggering, Novo Nordisk is bigger than the Danish economy with very few people on a drug that 50% of the developed world or higher could end up. And if the drug prices stay the same, they would be much bigger than Apple.
It sounds like a theme for a James Bond movie,
but yes,
all of Novo Nordisk.
I mean, we already live in a world of big pharma. We don't want pharma's money. We'd like to have pharma's involvement in this and giving us their wisdom and.
But isn't Congress going to take action?
Bernie Sanders has already threatened.
The notion that somehow or other Congress is going to take action is not very comforting.
I give you that point, sir.
But yes, this will become scandalous. I think the market forces on the price of these drugs is going to really push them down. Patents do expire. There is competition.
Well, I'm sort of mystified at the profitability of these. Did I hear you correctly? That the production costs are like $5.
I said at $5 they can be profitable. Not as profitable as 1,300.
Yeah, okay. I mean, given the fact that, first of all, you're saying that socialized medical entities could be bankrupted at some point in the not too distant future. I mean, how can this be allowable? And then the insurance companies, I mean, they're powerful too. I mean, I just, given the fact that it is the way pharmaceutical companies price out their products is controversial. I mean,
you're of course asking political questions.
Right, yeah.
But I can tell you right now, this all works for a small percentage of wealthy users.
Right.
Right now, off of those wealthy users and some people who get coverage from insurance, Novo Nordisk is as big as it is, and it works. But if we are real policymakers and want the world to be better, we want all the other people out there.
Okay.
And that only happens when the price is
30 or 40 years ago, you'd see people walking down the street with like this briefcase and a phone, and you'd see fancy cars, like high-ranking officials and stuff would have phones in their cars. And now everybody, everybody. And you're talking about a price differential here that is just, that's just incredible. Something that costs less than $5 to be selling for 900 or, one.
But what do they cost to develop it too? We've got to consider.
Oh, I know. Oh, yeah. I get that. That's what the drug companies, that's what they say.
I know, but
I know. They'll say that.
But the real cost of developing drugs is when there's small numbers of people who they can recover it from. This is the medication that we're talking the hundreds of millions. But I just go back to what I said at the end. For these things to be all that they can be and should be, they have to be safe and they have to be affordable.
Right.
I think we're making good progress on both. The $900 to $1,300 probably is not sustainable beyond another year. Already you can get coupons and bring that down in some cases to $500 or $600, still well out of the range of most people. But it is unconscionable that they stay at this level. It's not unconscionable, Dana, that initially they want their investment back.
Yes.
Well, they've gotten their investment back.
I have a couple of questions. So are we looking at Kentucky to see what the impact is on the broad masses being able to get it? And what are the impacts there?
It's only in the last week to the public, has Bowling Green been identified as the highest prescription rate. So I think we and others are going to start putting a lot more spotlight on Kentucky to see, but that will be, I mean, there are some, lots of middle class people in Kentucky, but there are some poor people. And we know that obesity is tied in many cases to income. And although some always thought it was counterintuitive that the poorer you are, the less you could afford food, but the poorer you are, the more likely you are to be obese, because it's the cheapest foods are some of the worst foods. So Kentucky, if I were not being a physician, but if I were picking a state I'd like to see heavy use, a rural red state would, West Virginia, Kentucky, that would be where I'd want to see. So yes, I think we and others are going to pay a lot of attention to Kentucky.
And
if I may say so, yay, third time's a charm. I actually did get a workaround. And this is the question I wanted to ask at the start. Thank you, Judy, for enabling me to come into the meeting again. And thank you to Adam for holding this meeting. Hi, Jeff. The moral imperative here is to ensure that everybody has access. You compared this possible wonder drug, Jeff, to penicillin, and there are others out there. Stipulating what you stipulated before, that if it's not made affordable, but it is found to be effective and has no long-term side effects that are terrible, what policy options are there to ensure that the price comes down if the market won't bring it down? You mentioned Kentucky. Mitch McConnell's from Kentucky. There are others who represent large swaths in the United States where obesity is a killer. And not to mention Alzheimer's and heart attacks and cancer possibly as applications. So what kind of policy levers does a big university like USC with a center in Washington have to see the price come down through policy? Thank you.
Great question. Well, of course, first of all, there will be public hearings, there will be pressure, there will be shaming, there will be all the things that Bernie Sanders, in my opinion, rightly will say. Hopefully, as I mentioned, these other things, the compounded, the loss of patents will help. But if it refuses to budge, and if the pharma companies refuse, you could see something as dramatic as the U.S. putting money into another company that would make them at little above cost, subsidizing that, the company getting started. I think the market is going to take care of this. But you raise a good question. We could hit a wall. The effectiveness doesn't seem to be an issue here. They are effective. I mentioned there are small numbers of people. They don't work, but they do seem to be effective. As I've mentioned several times, they have to be long-term safe. At the moment they are, or we think they are. So for them to refuse to budge is only, there are other countries that their Congresses and parliaments do work. And this also, this could become a bipartisan issue. Of course, Republicans are less likely to want to tell business what to do, but this is a public health issue.
The current administration has already made the first kind of halting steps through Medicare's price leverage to controlling the price of medicines that people need or want very badly. And there's no reason to imagine that step was the only. And I can't imagine that this problem isn't going to wind up getting resolved politically as well as.
I know this through my work with AARP, as extraordinarily groundbreaking it was that now we can force, or the government can force the drug companies to negotiate with Medicare. That's only 5 to 10 drugs a year that are added per year to that list. And it could, there's a lot of candidates on that list. It could take, of course, it could be expedited and moved high on the list. That's something AARP could put a lot of pressure on.
The one thing we can't shrink is, at least in this the way we live now, is time. So we're going to be up against our closing time. Gary Arlen and Margot back in LA. You'll get the closing questions.
And I have 30 seconds. Okay, so Gary Arlen.
Really, you've just addressed it. My question was a good 60s question about the haves and have-nots, but you dance around with your $1,300 price or the $5 price. But even the $150 a month copay, which I use one of the drugs, and copay on top of the thousands of dollars a year I pay in premiums to get access to it. It puts me and everybody at this table who's not wondering where the next meal is coming from in a different range than a lot of Americans, including the folks in food deserts and people who you just talked to who have very poor diets, access to very poor diets.
This is a have-not situation at the moment. It is a life changer potentially for many of those. And this is why I'm trying to raise attention among many others.
Is your study going to track how this plays out over time?
We're going to track. We're good at tracking. We're 26 years in, we still track the internet in 36 countries. And we are going to track attitudes and behaviors of the public at large, including those who don't use these medications, and how they feel. And we're going to track very specific things of people who are on them. And then we're going to track people who have gone off of them. And of course, one of the biggest incentives for going off is saving money. Some people want to be scrimp and save and are on them for 6 months. And unless they've learned profound changes in behavior, they're going to gain the weight back. Who did just?
Margot.
Margot.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted now. I just want to remind everybody that, well, maybe I have to inform people because I'm probably the oldest person in the room here, but back in the 1960s, John F. Kennedy had our presidential fitness plan in all the schools. And that's something that I think when we talk about policy, if we're talking about policy about having weight loss drug, what about policy for bringing the emphasis of fitness? And I think I've got the message that it would go hand in hand, but bringing it into the schools. I think there should, that fitness program that JFK had was a terrific idea, and it's just been long gone, I think, and forgotten. If you look at
I was in elementary school when that program was introduced, and we were all patriotic and tried very hard to stick with it. It was also, I think, around the time that the pyramid of food, which has changed a lot, and you are absolutely right. I think that was the premise behind physical education being part of a school day as well, and we seem to have lost that in my view.
A totally different kind of issue because people don't see the benefit of exercise in their daily lives, especially if they don't have a weight.
Also, to feel the I think to feel the benefits of exercise takes time.
Yes, exercise is hard. See, that's the thing that you can't forget. Exercise is a hard thing to do. And
we all got to watch the Olympics, which were spectacular.
It makes you feel like
but we just didn't see the 3 years and 11 months of 12-hour practices to get into shape and
the point about
to reap those benefits.
You don't have to do those things in order to get the benefit of exercise, but people even consider the early steps to be really hard. I have some experience with this, and that is a change of behavior that is going to be much harder than getting people to lose weight, which is something they all think they want.
Hey, I can't believe people have stayed on an hour, 15 minutes.
So we want food.
For those, people here want to get the food. But we are, as a center we really try to tackle the issues we think change the world. Our COVID research was pretty compelling in that regard. So we are committed to this. We are looking to really launch some major work, put on conferences, do briefings within government and industry. So any of you, you're welcome. If you just want to share your thoughts, or you want to get involved in some way, or just want to access, please just contact me. It's just Cole, C-O-L-E, at digitalcenter.org. In case you're from the British world, center is spelled E-R, the American way, or as I like to say, the right way. But we welcome your involvement. But thank you.
Shameless forward promotion. Jeff will be discussing this weekend on PBS here in Washington. It'll be on Saturday at 6 p.m. and again Sunday morning at 9 a.m. But the name of the program is White House Chronicle, and it'll be on for half hour. In some cities, it's 7:30 on Fridays. It's all over the place. Well, our next public program will be next Monday morning in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention. It'll be the start of 4 days of USC forums and roundtables from breakfast through lunch, all 4 days, Monday through Thursday, leading off Monday morning at 9 a.m. with deep fakes on election cybersecurity in the age of AI. These will be in person only, so we can't tune they'll be recorded, but in person only, and due to security at the Chicago Hilton, right across from where all the protests were in 1968, RSVPs will be required. So until then, we want to join me in thanking our speaker for and more. And until next Monday.
And thank you, everybody who came remotely. It's a lot harder to do that. Really appreciate it.